Start down at this end for question 3. What employment impacts have you witnessed or been involved in as a result of the dispensary closures? The estimated cost of the unemployment checks alone is between $9 and $12 billion. How can we as a community best mitigate these impacts?
I personally have not been involved with the unemployment impacts. I know other panelists have, and I'm going to defer to that one for them. I think the question that we need to ask, and you've heard it mentioned already, is creating a separation between recreational marijuana and medical cannabis. If we do that, then we can start to have a discussion about whether we want to treat recreational marijuana like we treat tobacco. Because then we're creating 3 potential levels of taxation. At the farmer or growth level, at the production, where you're talking about products and, to follow my analogy with tobacco, your cigarette manufacturers, your chewing tobacco manufacturers, and your miscellaneous product manufacturers, and then also at the retailer level. Those are going to be your 3 principal levels of tax. In addition, there's sales tax at the retail level, as in addition to income tax. So if we have that conversation, and that's quite frankly the conversation that's happening at the legislature right now, then we can talk about mitigating the effects of unemployment from closing the dispensaries.
Unemployment issues. Well, there's been a lot of not only the unemployment issues as far as a loss of jobs. Let's take a look at how some of these jobs without rules and regulations were actually being taken place. I went to one unemployment hearing on a certain individual who we were not the last employer on, and it came out that she was working for another dispensary that was actually doing volunteer service, and they would pay you in products. So she was working for approximately $30 worth of product a day, putting in a 10-hour day. That's what I consider slave labor. At the same time, many of these people are unemployment and using voluntary workforce. So again, that goes back to not having rules and regulations in place for dispense and collectives. You have such a amount of people that want to get into the industry, but they're not educated in the laws of the state of California, and they're not educated into the type of product that we're actually working with. And because it's something new that everybody thinks they can just open a door and become a part of it without having the education behind them. That's where all of you are in a key situation, and that's the education piece of this. Unemployment hurts everybody, and losing 100 clubs, we took a huge loss in Sacramento County as far as our unemployment, put many people back on. Unfortunately, a good portion of those people were already on unemployment working under the table, which is wrong in the first place. But we have to be able to put these rules in. It's absolutely essential so that we can move forward and get people off unemployment. My collective alone has over 10 employees with above average wages, with full medical benefits, 401k, dental, and vision. There is no reason any employer cannot have that, and yet I have one of the lowest rates in product. There's a reason for that. That has to do with not being greedy, not looking at this to make money, because this is a not-for-profit state, period. Our laws are not for profit. Thank you.
And there are many dispensaries like Lynette's and the one I work at that pay full payroll taxes and have to fire employees. And I know actually people who are qualified to be my boss asking me for work because of the shrinkage in employment in the medical cannabis industry. I know many people who, quote unquote, leave the industry, meaning they don't seek another job within that industry because there are so many of us who have spent years learning about the medicine and making this a big part of our lives, and then there's just no way to sustain ourselves because we don't have a job. And aside from dispensary workers and managers, you also have all the jobs that are potentially lost, including the nice man who from code enforcement who comes and inspects my dispensary and everybody's dispensary. He was hired, or his specialty is medical marijuana. There's different city groups, insurance groups. Like I said, the payroll tax group, or the payroll company I have, has a special medical marijuana section. And if medical marijuana does vanish altogether, which it seems to be that's what they want, by the way they're regulating us out of existence, then those people would lose their jobs too. And then there's, like I said, in advertising, Channel 58 had started its own medical marijuana division, and I saw the girl that was running that after the crackdown. She was looking for work. There was a man who opened up an advertising agency which was going to specialize in getting the word out about medical cannabis in a medical way and not treat it like recreational. And he had to change his focus of his company because after that crackdown, nobody wanted to advertise anymore. Very few are advertising anymore, and there's magazines that closed. There was a West Coast Cannabis friend of mine who ran that, who actually asked me for a job the other day. So it's very sad, and everything that the people who've lost their jobs spend money on is also being lost.
As a service for the collectives, for testing the safety of the medicine for the patients. It's amazing what has happened. You know, I was unemployed in 2010 of November and looking for a business to start, and I looked into this industry. And I did a tremendous amount of research. And this looked to be like a viable business. And as long as the collectives stay open, it was going to be a viable business. However, since October, we've had to trim the fat quite a bit around Sequoia. I've had to let someone go, and my lab technician's hours were cut from 8 hours down to 4 hours. We're now, looking into selling the company car. We've just got fat that we need to trim. And there are things that we just don't do any longer, like advertising. A lot of the consumables that we used to use are now having to make do with what we have. Professional services we've had to cut down on. Local commerce certainly takes effect because now I don't have enough employees. They don't use the services locally around us, delis, auto repair shops like I use all the time. But it's just amazing what has happened, and forgive me, but definitely it's so. What an impact this has done, and it's just a tremendous impact what it's done for my private income, the marketing dollars, the advertising dollars I put into this, they're all lost, they're all gone. In November of 2010, there was over 400 units, which we call pounds, dispensed per month in Sacramento. And I believe if I just had half of those units being tested for patients, it would be a viable business, and that's the reason why I went into it. But just the closures just certainly have been affecting so many. I mean, look at this now. This used to be, you roll this up, it used to be a weapon, and now you can't. And of course, what used to be, 80 pages? Is now just 8. So that's what's happened. A lot of investment dollars of my own and everyone else's has been lost on marketing, advertising, this, that. And now all I got to show for it is the machines in my shop. And we hope that it picks up here at Sequoia just for the patients, because the safety for the patients is really important, making sure that their health is not compromised by tainted material. Thank you.
Some of the investigations that I worked on as a police officer involved trafficking of all sorts of drugs and narcotics through the city. There was one occasion where I helped a partner. He had pulled over a van which had 40 pounds of marijuana inside and a couple of AK-47s. Their explanation at the time was that they were moving medical marijuana. and that may have been perfectly true. At the same time, it kind of compromises your ideals when you have a couple of assault rifles in the car. Now that these dispensaries have been shut down, not everyone, but a subset of people who are unemployed are probably going to look into getting back into trafficking. It's a matter of putting food on the table, and it's a matter of paying rent. There's going to be people who are going to look at doing what they used to do, which in the past may have involved a weapon, that they were able to get away from because there was a viable medical marijuana industry that legitimized what they did. And then at that point, where that industry went away, their needs did not. So they're going to look at protecting their investments and moving on. I think that law enforcement would be better served by having a bona fide, legitimate industry that respected people's health and safety, so we didn't have to come upon these situations where, regardless of whether or not you're actually moving medical marijuana, that you don't come across someone who's armed to the teeth when they're moving some of these shipments.
In Sacramento County, there was about 100 collectives. As you guys know, I keep saying that. Each collective employed approximately 10 to 20 people. That's 1,000 to 2,000 people that were laid off when the collectives were closed. This not only affects people financially, whereas let's say they were making $2,000 a month, they only get $800 from unemployment. They may lose their apartments, their houses. I've heard about that from multiple people. And it also has caused a lot of depression. These people were very close with the people they were working with. They loved their jobs. They loved helping people. They loved being a part of the community and making a better place for people in the world. And so it's not only affected people financially when they're unemployed, but it also affects them psychologically. And it not only affects the people who work in the collectives, but as we're talking about, it affects other businesses like laboratories, insurance companies, the News and Review, advertising, edible companies, topical companies, concentrate companies, the farmers who grow the medical cannabis, their families. I mean, it starts with a collective, and it's like ripple effects that go out throughout the community. So there's been a lot more people who have been affected by these closures than we actually know. And in a time when our county is actually having a big economic crisis itself, it could have made money and had more jobs for people who work for the county who have nothing to do with medical marijuana. And instead, it shut all the collectives down and probably lost some jobs because of that. I know that they had to lose some jobs in code enforcement once they weren't doing all the code enforcement actions on the collectives. So the effects are wide-ranging. I have no idea what to do about it except to try to open the collectives back up through an initiative, which I'll talk about in a little bit.